X-Men 97 is changing how Marvel makes movies. That's right. I've got a couple of different interviews here from Brad Winderbaum, and I want to explain how he's talking about how X-Men 97 has already changed the way they're making their movies and their shows. It has had a ripple effect throughout the studio. Really interesting question here. I'm also on Variety, just so you know. Says here, speaking of relationships, not to put too fine a point on this, but the X-Men have sex. And that is not something that Marvel Studios in general has explored a lot. I see you're nodding. Was that also something you discussed? And Brad answers, part of the ethos of the show is to emulate our memory of the original cartoon and honor the source material. In every page of X-Men is human desire and how it leads to romance, to complication, to people's awakenings in various ways over the years, and how it leads to conflict and tragedy, and how friends become enemies and enemies become friends. Part of that is about human desire and passion. Even though a lot of it is implied, you're right to say it's very present in X-Men. Now, the reason I bring that up, of course, is because, I mean, first of all, it's true, and it's kind of funny, right? Like, sex in X-Men, sex in a Marvel show. The old show is super horny, too, and I think he's right. Like, a lot of the X-Men comics are super horny. Like, human desire is throughout the X-Men series, for sure. It's interesting that he's talking about it as a vehicle for not just honoring what came before, but for creating compelling conflict. And I think that is an important part of the formula for X-Men 97, and hopefully something that begins to ripple throughout some of their other stuff, because I think sex and sexual tension, it works. And I think it's very useful, especially in the superhero kind of genre. Here's the juicy bit here. And there's another quote from a different article that I also want to read to you to kind of get the full scope of what Brad is saying. Lean in, wake up, and listen to this. Finally, X-Men 97 is in its own timeline. But what have you learned making this show that you think could translate to how Marvel moves forward with mutants in live action? So listen to this answer. You ready? Everything we make at the studios informs everything else. We have a very collaborative environment here. I've never worked anywhere else, so I don't know what it's like other places, really. But we're a tight-knit group. We're always looking at each other's materials and talking about each other's projects. Something like X-Men 97. It influences not just our plans for the X-Men, but he's saying that it is influencing their plans for the X-Men, but our studio overall. Just like everything else we make, it sends a ripple through the other creative projects, always trying to learn and have that conversation with the culture. I love the way he's wording this. And try to create stuff that we love, that hopefully other people love too. So, two things in there. Number one, he's saying absolutely is influencing the way we're thinking about mutants in live action. Dude, that feels great to hear. Like, it's great to hear that. But he's talking about how it doesn't just influence that. It sends a ripple effect throughout all of Marvel, okay? Now, I want to bring up this interview. This is from The Hollywood Reporter, okay? The name of this article is X-Men 97 EP Brad Winderbaum on Kevin Feige's mandate and how Daredevil Born Again updated MCU canon. I'm going to start here and I'm going to read these two quotes. However, in spring of 2022, the bubble burst as Wall Street fell off love with streaming. As a result, every streamer, including Disney Plus, had to try to reevaluate. Certainly, the world has shifted. The original idea was that we can create whatever we wanted to launch Disney Plus and to have a home for new Marvel ideas to take place. And now we do have to be a little bit more judicious with our choices. I mean, guys, that is so fucking huge. I know that might not seem like this big revolutionary thing, but I really want you to just absorb what he is saying here, okay? He's saying, certainly the world has shifted. The original idea was that we can create whatever we wanted to launch Disney Plus and to have a home for new Marvel ideas to take place. This is what I've been talking to you guys about for like a year. The Phase 4 mentality. The idea that they could do whatever they wanted. And this is an acknowledgement that that is not the way things are anymore. So he says, and now we do have to be a little bit more judicious with our choices. Okay, now I'm going to jump to another quote, and then I'm going to kind of like go into a little rant about why this is so dope, okay? So he says here, and he's referencing the major creative overhaul that happened with Daredevil Born Again, okay? So that's what he's referencing here. He says, frankly, a lot of that Daredevil Born Again reinventions was influenced as much from Loki as it was from our X-Men 97 experience. It's about honoring what came before in order to find a new arc for these iconic characters. So I am really excited about what's on the horizon. There's some great work coming down the pipe that audiences are going to really love. Okay, again, soak this shit in, man. Soak this shit in. He's saying the Daredevil Born Again complete creative overhaul was influenced as much from Loki as it was from our X-Men 97 experience. So going back to the original quote, right, where he's saying it creates a ripple effect that goes through all of our projects. Okay, so basically X-Men 97 and creating X-Men 97 was an experience that made them want to do the creative overhaul with Daredevil. I believe it's also an experience that made them want to make Echo the spotlight and make it more violent, make it, more hard. And so I think this is a sign that X-Men 97, which is this thing right now, which the fan base absolutely loved, very excited, very grateful that it happened. And there's a narrative out there, right? There are certain people that are saying it's just one show. It's just this animated thing. It's not going to save Marvel. It's not going to impact what they do from here. And I understand it. I understand being trepidatious. I also understand if like your audience captured and you grift on anti-Marvel and you just got to come up with that no matter what. That's where you're going to be at. You know what? God bless you. But the truth is that's wrong. It's incorrect. It's a false narrative. Brad is the guy that is explaining the truth of what is actually happening. And so there's a lot of question about what's going to be happening with the live action X-Men. Some people are like, okay, but X-Men 97 was so great, but obviously Marvel is not going to take that into account for their live action because Ralph Boner, the Ancient One, Phase 4, like all this shit, it's they're going to do that. And people are convinced of that. And I'm telling you, there's evidence, there's actual producers, and the fact that the creative overhaul of Born Again was literally influenced by X-Men 97. They're behind the scenes, they're watching this stuff be created, and they're like, whoa, this shit is hot. This is different. There's something here that's very, very good, that's resonating in a way that some of our other stuff is not. And so I think the truth is, X-Men 97 and the process of creating it, and especially now that they have seen how the audience has responded, it is absolutely influencing Marvel. And I love this idea of like honoring what came before in order to find a new arc. I mean, you think about Daredevil, Charlie Cox, D'Onofrio, they've been talking about this recently. The original version of Daredevil Born Again, it didn't have anything to do with the Netflix show. It was going to ignore it. It was going to try to be its own thing. And it was going to try to strike its own tone. And they essentially realized that shit ain't going to work. So let's go back to the old well. Let's put a lot of the old Netflix stuff into there, right? So when that comes to the X-Men, I really think, and I know this is an ongoing debate, we don't know for sure, but I tend to believe a lot of the traditional things that work in 97 are going to be brought in to the live action X-Men, even if they make the team slightly different, right? Maybe they go Scott and Emma, and it's uncanny, and it's, not like there's no Jean, and maybe there's no Charles, maybe there's no Logan. There's going to be some different stuff. I still think you're going to feel the fundamentals of what came before in X-Men. Because that's what he's telling us. Like, that's what he is literally saying. And so, as a big Marvel fan, this is exactly what I want to hear. Because the last thing we want is X-Men 97 to just be this awesome thing that Marvel Studios created that has nothing to do with all the other shit that they're doing that's not as awesome. We want there to be a crossover. We want this kind of language. We want them to be learning those lessons and applying it across the entire line. And so I really think this is another part of the MCU comeback season that I've been talking about. And I love these statements coming from Brad Winderbaum. And so I wanted to put that out there into the universe. Put it out there. The comeback season has begun. I'm telling you.